Hello, this is Jehar Lamin of Cape Academy, and in this little video, we're just going to prep some onset stills photography and take you through the workflow we're using here at Cape Academy. That allows us to prep data for lighting reference, for VFX, and then we have texture look development reference, and even if you're doing modeling reference and so on. The important thing about this workflow is going to be how we treat the data from in its initial kind of ingest. So taking that raw photography, whether that's CR2 data from Canon or ARW or AWR, I always get that wrong, data from Sony cameras, and then working with it in a way that doesn't have any issues with cropping when you're processing the data, to go from raw to TIFF files, and then going from TIFF to EXR. Okay, so our workflow, if I just give you a quick breakdown, is all kind of documented on this page. Now I should say that by the time you look at this page, it will be updated. So this is, as you can see, it says whip, whip, whip. But by the time I've finished this recording and updated all the images, this will all be good to go. I've got a couple bits here. I just want to quickly take you through. Let me just grab these here. Cool. This kind of gives a breakdown of the general workflow. So I just want to quickly give you a quick scribble on that. So we are shooting raw. We do shoot actually raw plus JPEG, but the JPEG are mainly for preview purposes. It's the raw stuff that we really want to make sure we're capturing. We're then taking those images into raw therapy. Now we're using raw therapy, I think it's 511 and onwards, primarily because this doesn't have any issues with cropping of the images. And I'll show you some of that. I'll compare raw therapy to, say, Lightroom and show you why we're not using Lightroom. Not only because raw therapy is also ACES friendly. I know Adobe have now introduced ACES into things, but again, there's another reason why we're not using Lightroom, and it's to do with cropping, and also if you're matching ST maps later on for kind of what do you call it, photogrammetry and things like that. So again, we're using raw therapy 511 ACES onwards. We are going from raw therapy to, well, we're outputting from raw therapy 32-bit linear ACEScg images. Now these are heavy. Each file is pretty chunky, but the reason we're doing that is so we don't have any loss of data. So that's very important. Now, I would say also that this data should be archived, and I'm going to call that V1. This is the raw data that we'd want to back up, so we can always get back to it. This stuff here is our V2. This is output from raw therapy. And this is the stuff we want to, again, archive, so we can then hand that to the rest of the pipeline. And we have that kind of starting point where we are initially playing with the data, or not playing with the data. We haven't done any grading. We haven't done any image processing of any kind. It is basically going from raw to 32-bit TIFF, and it's just been left as it is. So it's our starting point for now processing the data in Nuke or PTGUI or anywhere else. Okay, so we start off here, and again, I would archive that. Now, as mentioned, this is pretty chunky stuff. It's very heavy, so you may want to not archive it because it's big files, and instead you may want to just reprocess the data every time you need to start from beginning again. Because once you've actually done this bit here, you could say we don't need this stuff anymore because we processed the data and it's good to go in our pipeline. Okay, but I'll leave that up to you, and we'll discuss that later on in our upcoming courses and so on. But yeah, so archive, up to you. We are going to archive, and so we can just go back to it, but we may change our mind if we just find disk space is being chewed up too much. Once you have that data processed, though, this is where you can then take it into Nuke and do your grading, do your color temperature and exposure, etc. Make sure everything's correct using a color chart of some kind. At this stage, this is the stuff you would then probably pass through to the pipeline to say you're now ready to start working with the data. And in this case, they're going to PTGUI to do HDRIs, 360s, and so on. And technically, if you're doing a lighting reference, what this is meant to be a workflow for, we could just go from raw, and I do this, to PTGUI because it works in ACEScg and so on. And then you could do the grading later on. It's kind of up to you how you want to how you want to do things. I tend to find I do this workflow when I'm doing HDRIs, just go straight from raw and it does its thing. But again, if you want to do all of this process in between, then you can do. What we primarily use this for is going to be for texture and look development reference. So we do the same workflow, stills photography, whatever that is, comes in, it's raw. We then take that to raw therapy, again 5.11 onwards. And again, this bit's important, especially for modeling reference. I could add modeling into here as well. I'll show you that later on. We are then going to convert to 32-bit TIFF. Again, we'll archive that unless things become too heavy. And then in Nuke, we will then convert to whatever we need to from that ACEScg data set. So 32-bit TIFFs coming in, then output will be either 16-bit TIFFs in PNGs. Oh, sorry, I've got TIFF. It could be TIFF, it doesn't matter, TIFF or PNG, 8-bit PNG, 8-bit SI, JPEGs as well. The reason we're going from ACES to sRGB here, it's just easier to handle. Color-wise, we find this sort of data in Substance Painter, Mari, etc. So we're just finding for, especially for color, I should say, it's primarily for base color and things like that. And also when you want to review the data on a standard monitor, just having something that's been output in sRGB works pretty well on most monitors, unless you're doing something very color-centric and specific, and you've got the hardware to allow you to work in a more color-friendly way. But we're assuming most of the artists, especially students, are going to be working in a non-color graded, which isn't ideal, environment, monitor. And therefore, we're just going to switch everything to sRGB so it looks correct for those monitors. So on that note, yeah, we'll dive in. I'm going to take you, we've got some test data. Just hide that for a second. Not free test data, but it is test data. It's just these images here. This is part of our bigger course that we're doing in modeling and surfacing later on. This is captured from Clear Angle Studios. And if I just pull up the data here, this is what you've got to play with. Now, I will be playing with a bigger set of data just so I can show you. I've actually been testing already. I'm just going to get rid of some of this stuff. Good. Get rid of all this. Which is something I've already done. Yeah, I've got a bigger set of data that I'll be playing with, but it's basically the same workflow that I'll be presenting. The other thing I'll be showing in this video is a just to check against ST maps that your data lines up if you're being provided with undistorted images. So if you're getting scan data, for example, this is from Clear Angle Studios where they provided undistorted images. We just want to make sure that the workflow allows us to take our raw data and match this reference here, which is super important again, because if you've got a scanning vendor, they may process the images using their workflow for color, which might be out of sync with what you were doing. So although this is great for modeling reference off the top of the bat, when it comes to projection work, we're going to want to regrade, reprocess the images and use the same ST maps that have been provided. So the Clear Angle do provide, for example, ST maps for undistortion, and we'll look at how that all works. And again, it's important that to get it working and everything lining up, that we do use a workflow that doesn't crop any of the images. Okay, so that's the plan in a second. We've also got some HDRI data here as well if you wanted to test the lighting workflow. That's going to be documented here. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to jump straight in. We're going to prep the data in raw therapy. Again, these images will change by the time you watch this video. We're going to do the color management, demosaicing, and then we're going to take that data into Nuke. I'm not going to use the color target as you're seeing here. I'm just going to use a grade node. I'm not actually using the color target for any color processes anymore, I should say, because I find it does something weird to color. So I'll just be using a standard grade node for now, but it's, generally speaking, the workflow is going to be the same. Okay.